Is it just me, or didn't we just put away our Christmas trees? I could swear that it was just the other day that we all gathered in this room on Christmas Eve with our candles all aglow. Right? I think Ferris Bueller got it right when he said life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it, right? I hope you haven't missed the fact, like Mr. Chuck almost did, that Lent begins in just a couple of days. This Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. How did that happen? Is it me, or did it come up on us really quick? Now, don't get me wrong. Lent is probably my favorite time of the church year. I love the sacred practice of receiving ashes on my forehead to remember my own mortality. I love gathering for a warm midweek bowl of soup and the songs and the prayers of Holden Evening Vespers. I love the swell of emotion during Holy Week with one last meal that Jesus shares with his disciples, and even the dark solemnness of Good Friday. It's a somber time. It's a melancholy time. It's a time for self-reflection and self-denial. We all know where the path of Lent is leading us to the shame and suffering of Christ on the cross. And yet we still go, even though we know there's nothing we can do to change it. But today is Transfiguration Sunday, an in-between festival bridging the Advent, Christmas, Epiphany season, which ends today, and the Lent Easter season, which soon begins. And I don't think it's by chance that this day precedes the somber season of Lent and what is to come on Good Friday. You see, I think that Transfiguration Sunday serves as an intentional liturgical reminder, reminding us not only of the miraculous revelation of the disciples' mountaintop experience, but reminding us of our own mountaintop experiences, our own transcendent moments, so that we too might have something to hold on to in our own moments of suffering and shame. Let's explore. Our gospel lesson for this morning begins with the words, 6 days later. 6 days later, after what? Now, to know what happened 6 days prior, we have to look back at Matthew chapter 16. There we find the story of Simon Peter declaring Jesus to be the Messiah. Perhaps you remember it. Jesus names Simon Peter and tells him that on this rock, on this Petros, he will build his church. And in verse 21, it says, "From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised." Now, Peter was not a fan of what was to come. He rebukes Jesus, saying, "God forbid it, Jesus. This must never happen to you." And Jesus rebukes Peter back and says, "Get behind me, Satan." He goes on to tell the disciples that anyone who wants to follow him must deny themselves and take up their cross, and then reveals to them that they too will face their own suffering and death. And so when Peter and James and John accompany Jesus up that mountain, they've been stewing in this news for 6 days. Jesus' death is imminent. Their own suffering is certain. Jesus will be raised on the third day, but that seems a little ludicrous. can you imagine the side conversations that they had as they began to process what was about to happen? It's only natural that they might look for alternatives, desperate for a second opinion or a way to stop time. I think we all have those kind of times in our lives too, don't we? We can see the writing on the wall, we can see the train coming, and there is nothing we can do to stop it. We want to save our children from impending heartache, but we cannot. We want to find a way to write a different ending to the story, but we cannot. And neither could those disciples stop what was coming for Jesus and for themselves. And so they go up on the mountain, and on the mountain they have this transcendent experience. What happens on top of that mountain is hard to explain. The disciples were told not to even tell anyone about it until after the resurrection. But at some point it slipped out because even as we read it today, it is still shrouded in awe-inspiring mystery. Perhaps you have also experienced transcendent moments in your own life. Maybe you didn't see Moses and Elijah and a glowing Jesus, but maybe you did have a mountaintop experience which was hard to explain, where you were certain that you encountered the presence of God, which was unexplainable, but holy nonetheless. Sometimes these moments happen beside the bedside of a dying loved one. Sometimes they happen high in the mountains of New Mexico. Sometimes they happen down below by still waters. Sometimes they happen in the ordinary moments of a classroom or a boardroom or around the dining room table. But when they happen, we are given a glimpse of reality beyond our reality, right? Many years ago, I was on my way to church one morning, and I was really, really angry. I won't go into the details, but I was anxious and upset about something that I thought would happen, and I was all kinds of worked up. Have you ever had intense arguments with no one in particular inside your own head? Well, I was in the middle of a very heated debate in my head when, clear as day, words broke through that said, "Will you just trust me?" It wasn't audible, but it stopped me dead in my tracks. It was good I was stopped at a stoplight at 51st and Sheridan. Will you just trust me? Never before and never since have I heard God speak to me in such clear and rather, might I add, sassy way. I don't know how God speaks to you. My God is sassy. The disciples heard the voice of God speaking to them aloud. The voice came from a bright cloud and said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." These words echo both what was spoken at Jesus' baptism and the words of Isaiah, when the prophet says, "Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen in whom my soul delights." Listen to him, God says, "My servant, my chosen, my beloved." And the disciples fall on their face in fear. What else would they do? So Jesus reaches out and puts his hand on them, knowing that they are afraid both of the present moment and the future to come. Now, the best analogy that I have heard about this moment of the Transfiguration story comes from the book The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis, where he remarkably weaves biblical themes into a story about a fantasy world of magic and talking animals. Aslan speaks these final words to his friend Jill. He says, "Here on the mountain I have spoken to you clearly. I will not often do so down in Narnia. The air will thicken. Take great care that it does not confuse your mind. And the signs which you have learned here will not look at all like you expect them to look when you meet them there. That is why it is so important to know them by heart and pay attention to appearances. Remember the signs and believe the signs. Nothing else matters." What the disciples experience on top of that mountain with Jesus gives them a chance to see light, to see God's goodness in the chaos that is to come. The transfiguration is a holy moment, a holy encounter that will give them something to cling to remember, to trust, a sign in the midst of death and loss, fear, and even resurrection. My friends, we can't stay on the mountaintops forever. There's nothing we can do to stop the fact that we so often live down in the valleys below, the low points. We can't change that we all experience times of suffering and pain. We can't escape melancholy or sorrow. And yet God prepares us in transcendent moments, mountaintop experiences of our lives to live in the world below, to live in the world of the cross, to live in a world that might try to break us, but a world that is never beyond God's redemption. Here we are given all kinds of signs of hope and companionship and love. When I was a child, I used to curl up on my mom's bed, and she would pull out her guitar and sing to me. Sometimes she would sing folk songs, and sometimes she would sing songs about Jesus. As a little girl who experienced more trauma than she might have, should have, these were transcendent moments for me with my mom. Years later, the words to one of her songs would pop into my head, would come to mind when I would be experiencing moments of uncertainty. In a way, the song served as a sign, reminding me that I was loved, reminding me that everything would be okay, reminding me to give it to Jesus. The lyrics go something like this. He never said you would only see sunshine. He never said there would be no rain. He only promised a heart full of singing about the very thing that once brought pain. Give it all, give it all, give it all to Jesus. Shattered dreams, wounded hearts, broken toys. Give it all, give it all, give it all to Jesus, and he will turn your sorrow to joy. You see, the paradox of the Transfiguration story is that there was nothing the disciples could do to save themselves from the suffering that was to come. But there was also nothing they could do to shield themselves from seeing God's glory around them. The transfiguration of Jesus is the moment that God says to the world and to us that there is nothing we can do to prepare for sorrow or to stand in the way of joy. Yet whatever comes, we cannot escape the love of God. God will find us when our hearts are broken and when we discover delight. God will find us when we run away and when we are sitting in the middle of what seems like hell. God will not abandon us, my friends. Future glory awaits. Easter is coming. Until then, may the Lord bless your journey. Amen.